In today's video, I will not be discussing anything to do with weight, calories, calorie restriction, or food restriction of any kind. That is not something I advocate for, and I want this to be a safe space for people who may have a sensitivity towards that or a history with disordered eating. When I define diet, I'm talking about a way of eating and making choices around food, but I am not talking about restricting or losing weight or something like that. So I just want to be very clear and upfront about that. But if this is the kind of content that you fear will trigger you in some way, please click away. I completely understand. So I actually recorded a video that I thought would be real snappy and quick, talking about different diets that I've tried. But that turned into a totally different video where I talked about my whole history with why I chose certain diets, when, in terms of where I was in my life or my health and what it did and what it didn't do, all that stuff. That is coming soon and will be a much more elaborated video. So in today's snappy version of that video, I'm going to go through 5 different diets or way of eatings that I've tried whilst living with type 1 diabetes, which I have lived with for over 20 years. I kind of like to treat myself as a little bit of a guinea pig, and I enjoy trying different ways of eating and seeing how that affects my type 1 diabetes and investigating, is this going to make things easier or harder, or is this a way that I can get an extra 5 minutes of not thinking about type 1 diabetes? I'll take it if I can find it. So first up, I've tried veganism. I was vegan for about 4.5, 5 years. I really enjoyed going vegan. I really enjoyed the concept of it. I watched one of those documentaries and was like, I'm going vegan, and I did it overnight and I really enjoyed it. I love vegetables. I love cooking vegan. I don't particularly like cooking meat, so that was a real freeing aspect for me, and I just kind of fell in love with the whole ethos around it. I really enjoyed that. I thought I was doing something very good for the planet by making those choices, and it sort of became a bit of an identity. And within the veganism, I then went to high carb, low fat. So when I speak about my veganism, at first the switch, that was just really fun, and I had pretty good insulin sensitivity as a result. But the insulin sensitivity really took a bit of an uptick when I went on the high carb low fat, which was very confusing to me because I was like, hold on a minute, I'm eating all these carbs, but I'm not dosing for these carbs like I was before. And that was really cool. So from a type 1 diabetes perspective, everything just felt like a little more fluid at the beginning. I was more insulin sensitive and things were ticking along. That was lovely. But, and I cover this more in the other video, 3.5 years into this veganism and then into the high carb low fat thing, I had a lot of digestive problems. And I go into that more in the other video, but that's the reason why I switched. I started eating meat again, and then I started keto. So, veganism. I mean, initially, it was like 9 out of 10 for me. But at the end, it was 0 out of 10 because it wasn't something that was sustainable for me, and it was something that was causing a lot of damage, at least for me personally. It did not work for the long term. And that's a real shame because I loved eating that way and I really connected with the ethics of it. But my body was not happy at all. And it's a story that I've heard since going through all that from a lot of other people. That's not to say that it's bad. That's not to say that veganism isn't sustainable. It just wasn't sustainable for me, and I had to make a change. And because I am a person who, I love an extreme, I went keto. And I went keto for a variety of other reasons that were a little bit more based in just not just, I'm gonna try something else extreme. But I went keto. and I started eating meat, and I started eating a lot of fat. And for me, keto was like 30 grams of carb or less per day, which is nothing. I couldn't believe when I started it how little that was. And that's saying something, because we carb count, right, with type 1 diabetes. So that was tough. It was real tough. But for about 6 months, I locked in and was super, 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 super disciplined with the keto thing. And whatever was going on with my vegan and the stomach flare and everything like that, again, I go more into this in this video, the other video, but that helped calm things. And for the first, like, I don't know, 3 weeks, 4 weeks on keto, I like didn't have a low blood sugar. And I was like, is this the dream? Is this the answer to all my woes? Like, it was so cool how stable it made me. So I really get why a lot of people go keto and they're like, I ain't going back. I really get it. But it's also very restrictive in terms of you're constantly, if you're trying to, quote, do it right. And I was not trying to go into keto, like I wasn't testing my urine and trying for ketones in my urine. No, I wasn't trying for any of that. In fact, I was really actively trying to avoid that. So I use the term keto very loosely in that I was just very low carb. So perhaps it's better to classify it as extremely low carb rather than keto. But when you take those carbs down, you have to find the energy elsewhere. So you end up eating a lot of fat, because you got to get your calories from somewhere, and you need that fat if you're not having those carbs. So that was a very interesting trial and error with seeing what it did to my insulin levels and keeping my blood sugar quite stable. It was lovely. But I went keto during COVID, and it's not very sustainable. At least it wasn't for me. I just felt pretty tied down to it. I wanted to go to a birthday party and have a piece of cake and not feel like I was betraying my plan. I wanted to be able to have like the lovely apple bake that my mom makes that I love so much. Like, there are things like that that I really wanted to have the freedom and flexibility around, that just when I was doing keto, like really disciplined, those were off the table. I was probably keto for about a year and a half, 2 years, and that was fine. But I was also towards the end of that time thinking, I've kind of been on like extreme ends of the spectrum for like a good 7 years now, and I really want to try for balance in my life, not just one extreme or another, or cutting out whole food groups and not eating other, the whole thing. So I was like, I just kind of started dismantling the restrictions around things, started introducing more carbs, started introducing more fruits, but all the while trying really whole food, pretty protein centric, which is where I'm at today. So for me, keto when I started was also like 10 out of 10. Like, it was just like, oh, this is great. But as it went on, that rating for me lowered, because I was like, I don't know, I feel a little bit restricted, and I didn't love that feeling. I didn't think it was the most healthy to see me through for the long term. It was great to kind of calm down stuff that was going on in my stomach, and it's something I still do from time to time for little short periods of time. If I've got a flare up going on in my stomach, that helps kind of calm things. But later on, the rating dropped. Maybe I'd give keto like a 6 out of 10. So I'll talk more about where I'm at right now in a sec. But another thing I wanted to add in was that I've tried intermittent fasting before too. And a lot of people talk about intermittent fasting as being great for blood sugar stabilization and all of that. So for most people, what that looks like is an 8-hour eating window during the day, and then a 16-hour, some people do 14, 12-hour fasting period, normally timed with an overnight. So obviously overnight you're not eating, but then tacking on those extra hours wherever you want to also choose to not eat, and that is an intermittent fast. A lot of people love intermittent fasting. I just think for me, I don't eat big enough meals. Like I can't eat a ton in one sitting, so I'll have more like grazing type of behavior. And because of that, I felt this pressure to like get everything in, and then that last meal being like a stress of like, okay, I'm not going to eat again. It created this kind of weird scarcity, feast or famine mindset for me. Also, if I got a low blood sugar during my fasting time, that sort of felt like, oh man, I've ruined it. It was just a structure that didn't work for me. I totally get why it works for other people. It's just for me, it was like, this isn't great. And it started affecting my mental health. And the minute that happened, absolutely not. From a type 1 diabetes perspective, I would have pretty stable overnight numbers, which was kind of great, very nice, also kind of to be expected with certain algorithms I've been on the Omnipod 5 and before I was on the T-Slim. So because there wasn't a lot of food in the system, there wasn't a lot to kind of deal with. And that made overnights pretty great. But in the morning, I really, when I was breaking that fast, I had to get a real healthy pre-bolus on board, because even if I was breaking my fast with something protein heavy and not carb heavy, I was still needing that good dose of insulin in order to not see a spike, which was super interesting to me, but also makes sense because, you know, if you don't have a lot to contend with, you don't have a lot of kind of background basal rates that may potentially cause you to come at a meal with some inadvertent insulin on board from your basal rates. So I did understand that, and I didn't think it was making me insulin resistant, quote unquote, but it was an interesting thing to contend with and just really annoying to contend with early in the morning. Mornings are hard enough, in my opinion. So for me, intermittent fasting was like, I don't know. It just wasn't the one for me. I can't even rate it. What, 3 out of 10? Something like that. So that brings me to today. And I guess today is whole foods. I try as much as possible to eat foods in their original or as close to original state as possible. But not a lot of raw food. I don't do a lot of raw food at all, but like, you know, a baked potato rather than French fries, a baked potato rather than chips, this kind of thing. Very crude example. But eating everything, fish, chicken, beef, vegetables, fruits. And I'm not perfect by any stretch, but I like the structure of thinking from a whole foods forward perspective, because it basically gives me pause. Very basic example. I'm hungry. I'm out in the city, middle of the day. When I go into a grocery store or a supermarket like 7-Eleven thing, because I have this structure mindset of wanting to eat whole foods, rather than go and grab a pack of cookies, which is totally what I want, and sometimes I do that. Don't get me wrong. But rather than do that, I make a concerted effort to think, okay, hold on. I know you want the cookies because everybody wants the cookies, like 100%. But would like some hard-boiled eggs be nice? Would a piece of fruit be nice? Like sometimes I've even gotten like chicken breast when I'm out. It may sound nuts to some people, but to see the world through that filter really helps me to kind of make healthy decisions. That also, for my type 1 diabetes, makes things a little bit easier. 2 + 2 never equals 4 with type 1 diabetes, like never. But I find when I'm eating more that close to the whole food way of eating, things make a little more sense, and my body is a little more willing to play ball with me and not be so outrageous in terms of, you know, skyrocketing or dropping to the floor for no reason. Blood sugar, not myself personally. Unless it's part of a dance routine, which actually I did a dance routine yesterday. Hilarious dance class that we had to drop to the floor. And it's really not my move. It's really like, it wasn't good. Whole foods, protein centric, 10 out of 10. Okay, maybe 9 out of 10. Because sometimes, it's like, I don't want to make the healthy choice. But I guess in my mind, it's 10 out of 10 because if I don't want to make the quote unquote healthy choice or whatever, I don't even like saying healthy choice. You know what I mean. If I don't want to make that whole food choice, I have the cookies. I have the chips. It's all good. So I suppose it's like whole foods, protein centric, but with like a very open mind and a lot of flexibility. And I really embrace being in that place after I've been in so many sort of extremes with my diet. So for me, it's a 10 out of 10 because it's no rules, but it's a kind of lens that I can view things from and make positive choices around, but that is I'm not shackled to any one kind of philosophy around food. So there we have it. Though I know this is a very sensitive subject, I also don't want to ignore the questions about like, hey, what do you eat, or what do you think of this diet, or what do you think of that diet? Because yeah, like we're all curious, and we have to acknowledge that eating a certain way can sometimes really unlock a freedom for somebody when you're living with a chronic condition like type 1 diabetes. And that's to be really, really, really celebrated. Like anything that gives you that 5 minutes more of not thinking about type 1 diabetes, or stabilizes you or satiates you, anything that gives you that, I think is to be embraced. But it's a very, very, very complicated subject to traverse, and I'm by no means an expert. So with all that being said, I wish you guys a wonderful day wherever you are in this world. I wish you great blood sugars, happiness, joy, freedom, all the things around food that work for you. You individually. That's the most important thing. Please listen to your body and your needs and what you need socially around these things too. Because it's not just what's on your plate, it's how you live your life. But I'm going to say it. Most important of all, please keep a happy, healthy mind with it all. That I think is paramount above everything else. So thank you so much for watching. I'll meet you down in the comments section. We can get a conversation going. I wish you a wonderful day, and I will see you soon.